The rain hammered against the windows of our small apartment in Manchester, mirroring the storm brewing inside me. It had been a slow burn, a creeping unease that had taken root in my gut over the past few months. I'm Alistair, 44, an IT specialist, and until recently I thought I had it all. A loving wife, a comfortable life, and a future stretching out before me, filled with promise. My wife, Bronwyn, was a vibrant, energetic woman, a primary school teacher who poured her heart into her work. We had been together for 15 years, married for 12, and I genuinely believed we were rock solid. But then came the subtle shifts. Bronwyn started staying late at school more often, claiming she had extra tutoring sessions or meetings. Her phone became her constant companion, clutched protectively in her hand, its screen always facing down. She became less affectionate, her kisses perfunctory, her hugs brief. Our conversations dwindled, replaced by monosyllabic replies and a distant, preoccupied air. I tried to brush it off, attributing it to stress or work pressures. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was letting my insecurities get the better of me. But the feeling persisted, a nagging voice whispering in the back of my mind that something was terribly wrong. One evening, Bronwyn told me she had a staff development weekend in Birmingham. "It's mandatory," she said, her eyes avoiding mine. "I have to go." I offered to drive her, but she demurred, saying she wanted to travel with her colleagues. "It'll be fun," she said, a strained smile on her face. I kissed her goodbye, feeling a knot of unease tighten in my stomach. As I watched her walk away, a sudden impulse seized me. I didn't know why, but I felt compelled to check her story. I waited an hour, then called the school. I asked to speak to Bronwyn, explaining that I had an urgent message for her. The receptionist, a friendly woman named Chloe, put me on hold. After a few minutes, she returned, her voice hesitant. "I'm sorry, Mr. Davies," she said. "Mrs. Davies isn't here. She's not on the list for the staff development weekend." My blood ran cold. I thanked Chloe and hung up, my mind reeling. Bronwyn had lied. She wasn't in Birmingham, but where was she? And why had she lied to me? The questions swirled in my head, each one more terrifying than the last. I spent the next few hours pacing the apartment, my anxiety growing with each passing minute. I tried calling Bronwyn's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I sent her text messages, pleading with her to tell me where she was, but she didn't reply. Finally, unable to bear the suspense any longer, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I knew I was probably overreacting, that there could be a perfectly innocent explanation for her absence, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I grabbed my coat and headed out into the rain, determined to find out the truth. My first stop was Bronwyn's best friend, Laurie. They had been inseparable since childhood, and I figured if anyone knew where Bronwyn was, it would be her. I drove to Laurie's house in Didsbury, my heart pounding in my chest. I rang the doorbell and Laurie answered, her eyes widening in surprise when she saw me. "Alistair, what are you doing here?" she asked, ushering me inside. I explained the situation, telling her about Bronwyn's staff development weekend and the phone call to the school. Laurie listened patiently, her expression growing increasingly concerned. When I finished, she sighed and shook her head. "I don't know what to say, Alistair," she said. "Bronwyn hasn't mentioned anything to me about a staff development weekend. In fact, she told me she was planning to spend the weekend at home, catching up on some reading." My stomach dropped. Bronwyn had lied to Laurie too. "Do you have any idea where she might be?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Laurie hesitated, then said, "There's something I need to tell you, Alistair, but you're not going to like it." She led me into the living room and sat me down on the sofa. "A few weeks ago," she began, "Bronwyn told me she was unhappy. She said she felt trapped in your marriage, that she needed something more exciting in her life." I stared at her in disbelief. "Trapped? But we're happy, aren't we?" Laurie avoided my gaze. "I don't know, Alistair," she said. "I just know that Bronwyn hasn't been herself lately. She's been acting strange, secretive, and I've seen her texting someone a lot, someone she calls Gareth." The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Gareth. I knew a Gareth. Gareth Pritchard, a colleague of Bronwyn's at school. He was younger than me, handsome and charming. I had always felt a twinge of jealousy whenever Bronwyn mentioned him. Do you think she's having an affair with him?" I asked, the words catching in my throat. Laurie nodded slowly. "I'm sorry, Alistair," she said. "I didn't want to believe it, but I've seen them together. They've been meeting for coffee, for lunch. And I saw them holding hands once in the school car park. I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. My world was spinning, the reality I had always known crumbling around me. My wife, the woman I loved, was having an affair with another man, and she had been lying to me, to my friends, to everyone. I stood up abruptly, my legs shaky. "I have to go," I said, my voice hollow. "Thank you, Lori, for telling me the truth." I stumbled out of the house and into the rain, the cold water doing little to cool the burning rage that was consuming me. I got into my car and drove aimlessly, my mind a whirlwind of anger, betrayal, and hurt. I didn't know where I was going, what I was going to do. All I knew was that I couldn't stay in that apartment, surrounded by the memories of our life together, the life that was now a lie. After driving for what seemed like hours, I found myself outside the school. It was late, the building dark and deserted, but I couldn't resist the urge to see it, to stand on the ground where my wife had betrayed me. I parked the car and got out, walking slowly towards the school gates. As I approached, I noticed a car parked in the shadows, hidden from view. It was Bronwyn's car. My heart leaped into my throat. What was she doing here, at this time of night? I crept closer, peering through the darkness. And then I saw them. Bronwyn and Gareth, locked in a passionate embrace in the front seat of the car. Their faces were illuminated by the dim glow of the dashboard lights, their bodies pressed close together. I watched in stunned silence, my blood turning to ice. The reality of the situation crashed down on me, crushing me with its weight. My wife was cheating on me, and she was doing it with a man I knew, a man I had trusted. A wave of nausea washed over me, and I staggered back, my hand flying to my mouth. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I wanted to scream, to shout, to tear them apart. But I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I was paralyzed by shock, by disbelief, by the sheer magnitude of the betrayal. After what seemed like an eternity, I finally found the strength to turn away. I stumbled back to my car, my vision blurred by tears. I got in and started the engine, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I drove away from the school, away from Bronwyn and Gareth, away from the life I had known. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay in Manchester. I needed to escape, to get away from the pain, the hurt, the humiliation. I drove through the night, the rain still falling, the road ahead stretching out into the darkness. As the sun began to rise, I found myself in a small coastal town in North Wales. I pulled into a parking lot overlooking the sea and stopped the car. I got out and walked to the edge of the cliff, gazing out at the vast expanse of water. The wind whipped around me, carrying the salty scent of the sea. I stood there for a long time, watching the waves crash against the shore, listening to the cries of the seagulls. Slowly, gradually, the numbness began to fade, replaced by a burning anger, a fierce determination to reclaim my life. I knew I couldn't go back to Bronwyn. I couldn't forgive her for what she had done. The trust was broken, the love was gone. Our marriage was over. But I also knew I couldn't let her destroy me. I wouldn't let her win. I would pick myself up, dust myself off, and start again. I would find happiness again, even if it was without her. I spent the next few days in the small town trying to clear my head and figure out what to do next. I found a small hotel to stay in and spent my days walking along the beach, exploring the town and reading. I avoided the news, avoided social media, avoided anything that might remind me of Bronwyn. I needed to disconnect, to heal, to find my center again. One afternoon, as I was sitting in a cafe, I received a phone call from Bronwyn. I hesitated for a moment, then answered it. "Alistair," she said, her voice trembling. "Where are you? I've been trying to reach you for days." I took a deep breath and said, "I know about you and Gareth, Bronwyn. I saw you at the school." There was a long silence on the other end of the line, then Bronwyn began to cry. "Alistair, I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I didn't mean for it to happen. It just happened. It just happened," I repeated, my voice laced with sarcasm. "You lied to me, you cheated on me, and you tell me it just happened." "I know I messed up," she said. "But I still love you, Alistair. Please give me another chance. I promise it won't happen again." I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "Another chance? Bronwyn, you've destroyed everything. There is no another chance." "Please, Alistair," she begged. "Don't do this. Don't throw away our marriage." "Our marriage ended the moment you got into that car with Gareth," I said. "Goodbye, Bronwyn." I hung up the phone and turned it off, severing the last connection to my old life. I knew that Bronwyn wouldn't give up easily. She would try to contact me again, to plead with me, to manipulate me, but I was done. I was finished with her lies, her betrayal, her selfishness. I was ready to move on, to build a new life for myself, a life free from her toxic influence. I returned to Manchester a week later, not to reconcile with Bronwyn, but to pack my belongings and start the divorce process. I hired a lawyer and instructed him to handle everything. I didn't want to see Bronwyn, didn't want to speak to her. I just wanted to be done with it. As I was packing, I came across a box of old photographs. I sat down on the floor and opened it, my heart aching as I looked at the images of our life together. There were pictures of our wedding day, of our holidays, of our birthdays. Pictures of us laughing, smiling, holding each other close. Pictures of a life that was now gone, shattered into a million pieces. I picked up a photograph of Bronwyn taken on our 10th anniversary. She was radiant, beautiful, her eyes sparkling with happiness. I remembered how much I had loved her, how much I had believed in our future together. And now it was all gone, all destroyed by her infidelity. A wave of grief washed over me and I began to cry, the tears streaming down my face. I cried for the loss of our marriage, for the loss of our dreams, for the loss of the woman I had loved. After a while, the tears subsided, replaced by a sense of calm, a sense of acceptance. I knew that I would never forget Bronwyn, that she would always be a part of my past, but I also knew that I couldn't let her define my future. I had to move on, to find happiness again, to build a new life for myself. I closed the box of photographs and put it away, ready to leave the past behind. The divorce was finalized a few months later. Bronwyn didn't contest it, didn't try to fight for anything. She seemed resigned to the fact that our marriage was over. I didn't see her again, didn't speak to her. I just moved on with my life. I decided to leave Manchester and start fresh somewhere new. I had always dreamed of living by the sea, so I decided to move to Cornwall. I found a small cottage in a quiet village and started working remotely. The pace of life was slower, more relaxed. The people were friendly and welcoming. I spent my days walking along the coast, exploring the countryside and enjoying the peace and quiet. Slowly, gradually, I began to heal. The pain of Bronwyn's betrayal began to fade, replaced by a sense of hope, a sense of possibility. I started to meet new people, to make new friends. I even started to date again. It wasn't easy, but I was determined to find happiness again. One day I met a woman named Isolde. She was a local artist, kind, intelligent, and beautiful. We started dating and I quickly fell in love with her. She was everything Bronwyn wasn't: honest, loyal, and supportive. She helped me to heal from the past and to look forward to the future. A year later, Isolde and I got married. It was a small, intimate ceremony, attended by our closest friends and family. As I stood at the altar, looking into Isolde's eyes, I knew that I had finally found happiness again. I had survived Bronwyn's betrayal and I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient. But the story doesn't end there. A few years later, I received a message from a mutual friend, telling me that Bronwyn's life had taken a turn for the worse. Gareth had left her for another woman, and she had lost her job at the school. She was struggling financially and emotionally, and she was all alone. I felt a pang of sympathy for her, but I also knew that she had brought it all on herself. She had made her choices, and she had to live with the consequences. I didn't reach out to Bronwyn, didn't offer her any help. I knew that it was best for both of us to keep our distance. I had moved on with my life, and she needed to do the same. I had found happiness again, and I wasn't going to let her ruin it. My story is a story of betrayal, heartbreak, and resilience. It's a story of how I survived the worst thing that could have happened to me and how I found happiness again. It's a story that I hope will inspire others who have been through similar experiences to never give up on themselves, to never lose hope, and to always believe that there is light at the end of the tunnel. And so, I close my tale here, hoping that you, the listener, find solace and strength in my journey. Remember, even in the darkest of times, the human spirit can endure and love can be found again. Never lose faith in yourself, and never let the actions of others define your worth. Good night.